human civilization advanced at a relatively slow pace for thousands of years. However, in more recent history, particularly since the European Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries, social progress has accelerated significantly, driven by major developments in science and technology. Subsequently, from the latter half of the 20th century, rapid advances in information and communication technologies have profoundly transformed both personal and social life. This information technology revolution remains ongoing. Simultaneously, the modern state has succeeded in consolidating and expanding its authority over society. The overwhelming pace of these changes has compelled people across cultures to abandon inherited wisdom, traditional values, and long-established customs, rendering many of them obsolete. The elimination of gender inequality has become a stated objective of contemporary society and the modern state. Across different regions of the world, people are actively introducing new legislation, implementing policies and social norms, and promoting women's empowerment initiatives to realize gender equality. Now, let us envision a future society entirely free from gender bias. In such a gender-neutral context, what form will romantic love between men and women assume? Love is often regarded as timeless and universal. Yet, will romantic love in a future gender-unbiased society remain the same as it is today? Or will it too shed its gendered assumptions and evolve into an entirely new expression? Hello everyone, and welcome to the series Men's World, Men's Queries. I am Dr. Samir Roy, Professor of Computer Science and Technology. Today's discussion centers on the question, what might romantic love look like in a future gender-unbiased society? If you are interested in exploring more content on gender or sexuality, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let us now proceed to examine the question, what would futuristic, gender-neutral romantic love look like through a rational and analytical lens? The conventional understanding of romantic love between a man and a woman has evolved within a historically gender-biased social framework. It is therefore reasonable to expect that if genuine gender equality is established in relationships between men and women, this structural transformation will also be reflected in the nature of romantic love. To conceptualize this future form of gender-unbiased love, it is useful to first examine what a truly gender-neutral relationship between a man and a woman might entail. First, a woman would be financially independent, meaning she would no longer depend on a man as a provider. Traditionally, women were expected to marry and place the responsibility for their lives largely in the hands of men. With the establishment of gender equality, a woman would no longer need to seek a partner for lifelong economic security. At the same time, the availability of birth control has given women full autonomy over their reproductive choices. Consequently, there would be no material or economic rationale for treating extramarital sexual relationships as inherently impermissible. Moral objections may certainly be raised. However, in the absence of tangible real-world harms, such objections are likely to gradually lose influence. Cultural or religious moral frameworks, along with long-standing social norms related to chastity, bodily and spiritual purity, and fidelity, may continue to restrain individuals to some degree, but these constraints are unlikely to remain effective beyond 1 or 2 generations. The rationale is straightforward. A healthy adolescent girl typically reaches puberty around the age of 12 or 13, while boys generally attain sexual maturity between 14 and 15 years of age. In contrast, it often takes 25 to 30 years for individuals to complete their education, secure stable employment, and become socially eligible for marriage. Under such circumstances, there is little reason to expect young men and women, provided they possess adequate sex education and knowledge of safe sexual practices, to entirely abstain from sexual activity. Furthermore, in a liberal society, men and women would interact freely in all spheres, particularly in professional settings, creating opportunities for the formation of extramarital romantic relationships. There would be little justification for expecting such relationships to remain non-sexual. The central argument is that when women attain financial independence and have access to safe sexual practices, the necessity of entering long-term monogamous romantic partnerships with men is significantly reduced. Conversely, if sexual relationships outside marriage are easily accessible, men may likewise feel less compelled to seek a lifelong, exclusively faithful partner. Most people continue to view ideal love between a man and a woman as being rooted in monogamy, fidelity, and long-term stability. Traditionally, romantic love has functioned as a social bond that encourages two individuals of the opposite sex to remain loyal to one another. This idea of romantic love has historically enabled humans to regulate innate polygamous tendencies and to establish enduring, stable conjugal relationships. However, it would not be surprising if the long-term effects of women's financial independence and the advent of birth control eventually lead to greater societal acceptance of previously suppressed polygamous instincts. In practical reality, individuals may increasingly prioritize personal autonomy and material well-being over emotional bonds and fidelity. As a result, commitment-based romantic love may gradually lose its relevance in a future gender-neutral society. This raises an important question. What form of love will then be recognized and embraced by mainstream society? To address this question, it is necessary to examine the defining characteristics of the ideal, gender discrimination-free society toward which we are steadily progressing. It can be broadly anticipated that in such a society, first, both women and men will be self-sufficient, autonomous, and empowered. Second, women will possess complete reproductive rights, freedom, and authority over their own bodies. Third, if a woman so chooses, she may opt out of the unpaid reproductive labor traditionally associated with motherhood. This would imply the existence of technologically mediated reproductive systems, including gestation within an artificial uterus under controlled laboratory conditions, without requiring the physical involvement of a woman's body. Fourth, the state will establish appropriate systems for child rearing, including institutional arrangements that allow children to be raised outside the traditional family structure without the direct supervision of parents. Fifth, there will be formal provisions recognizing single mothers and single fathers as sole parents responsible for the upbringing of a child. Sixth, artificially intelligent humanoids will be commercially available to adults of all genders, capable of providing personalized and customized forms of intimate companionship. Seventh, men and women will be free to engage and interact across all spheres of social life, with polygamous relationships receiving social acceptance and formal recognition by the state. In such a social context, the necessity for permanent or long-term, stable, monogamous, and exclusively faithful romantic relationships would be significantly reduced. Consequently, romantic love in its current form would hold limited relevance in such a free society. However, this does not suggest that love would vanish entirely from the human psyche. Attraction toward the opposite sex is a fundamental biological instinct, and while social structures may evolve, biological impulses remain largely unchanged. Love, therefore, would continue to exist, albeit in a transformed expression. In a more advanced social environment of the future, romantic love between men and women is likely to become freer and more selfless. A woman would no longer be compelled to love a man for survival, nor would a man feel obligated to love a woman solely out of marital or social duty. Individuals will love one another because of genuine emotional connection, rather than due to obligation or external expectations. As long as this affection remains vibrant, engaging both mind and body, and generating mutual joy, the relationship will continue. There will be no compulsion to prolong a lifeless relationship out of habit, convention, or duty. In this context, the traditional notion of fidelity will also lose its significance, as individuals will not be bound to one another solely by the existence of love itself. As unrestricted interaction between men and women becomes the societal norm, including within professional environments, it will be increasingly difficult to prevent individuals from forming multiple romantic relationships with different partners. Under such conditions, sexual jealousy or expectations of exclusivity may, in certain cases, strain relationships or give rise to more serious conflicts. However, if the risk of unwanted pregnancy is fully eliminated and direct parental involvement in child rearing is no longer considered essential, society may become more accepting of polyandrous arrangements. Indeed, if sexual activity were fully separated from reproduction, there would be little rational basis for prohibiting polyamorous relationships. Society would gradually become increasingly open and permissive in its attitudes. Taking all factors into account, in a future gender-unbiased society, romantic love, described by Plato as eros, is likely to give way to relationships that blend emotional companionship with sexual intimacy. Such light-hearted and playful forms of love, referred to by Plato as ludus, may ultimately emerge as the dominant expression of love in human society. It is evident that no single model of love will be universally adopted. Individuals will retain the freedom to choose their preferred forms of relationships. Couples who embrace traditional arrangements may choose to have children through conventional means and raise them within a family environment, thereby establishing familial bonds grounded in marriage and traditional notions of love. Conversely, individuals may opt to pursue everyday aspects of life, such as cohabitation, sexual relationships, parenthood, and child rearing independently without entering into a conjugal partnership. In a technologically advanced, socially equitable, and gender-neutral society, all such pathways would remain open to everyone. Nevertheless, human beings possess an inherent inclination toward freedom. Social bonds are often formed primarily to ensure survival under particular circumstances. Once survival is secured, individuals naturally aspire to greater autonomy and independence. It is therefore hopeful to envisage that the prosperity of a future society will eliminate gender discrimination and enable every individual, regardless of gender, to live with dignity and self-respect. Consequently, in forming relationships between men and women, values such as personal freedom, human dignity, and social justice are likely to take precedence over pragmatic concerns like financial dependence or convenient access to sexual relations. From this perspective, what Plato described as ludus, a playful form of love combining friendship and sexuality, appears poised to become the dominant model of gender-unbiased love. Ultimately, however, these reflections remain speculative. No one can say with certainty what the future will truly bring. Thank you, my friends, for taking the time to watch this video titled "What Might Romantic Love Look Like in a Future Gender-Unbiased Society?" on the Men's World Men's Queries channel. I would be glad to hear your views and perspectives on this topic in the comments section below. If you are interested in more discussions on gender or sexuality, please consider subscribing to this channel. That concludes today's session. Thank you, and I look forward to connecting with you again.